All right, so good morning and welcome. And this morning we have a presentation from the OBF Project Me syllabus or program, if you want to call it that. Okay, so this is lesson 2, and this lesson is on self-image. So this is going to be a short lesson, and I'm hoping that the objective of this will be that I will just offer a new and maybe a different way in which you might view the topic or the subject of self-image. So first of all, currently, where are we? Okay, I think we're in a self-image crisis, and we can blame social media, we can blame society, we can blame whatever it is, but at the end of the day, we're definitely in an era where the the ability to be yourself and the ability to accept yourself for who you are is definitely at an all-time low. And with the advent of filters and with the advent of different ways in which we can blur and give out a different perception of who we are, much of society and many people are left with this double image of who they are. So they have this internal image of who they think they are themselves, and then they have this image of what they feel they need to portray out to the world. Okay, and I think that that's an indictment in modern day society. I think that's a very sad place to be, because I think that leads to so many issues that we have in terms of lack of self-acceptance, poor identity, negative athletic identity. And I think that that leads to a tremendous amount of issues in terms of people following and getting involved in activities that aren't exactly conducive to them being their best self. Okay, so people try to escape who they are as a person, and many people do this with drugs, with alcohol, with sex, with porn, with gambling, whatever it is, because I feel myself that most of this, even though they're all addiction problems, they're all deeply rooted from some lack of self-worth, or they're all deeply rooted from some lack of self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-acceptance, and there's something deeply seated within the organism or within the mind that's not at play. So when we look at this little image to the right, I have shown this so many times before. So the problem is that we have this waterfall of how we should be developing our strategies and our actions, right? So, at the very top, you have our identity. I am. Okay, I am strong, I am healthy, I am happy. From there, we set our value system. So I am strong, I value strength training, I value good nutrition. Then I believe that I can lift X, Y, or Z, or I believe that I can handle X, Y, or Z situations. My actions are I train 3 days a week, I meditate, so both my mind and my body are strong. My strategies around that are my sets, my reps, and my everyday life. And when we attack things from the top down, with a really solid sense of identity and then values, then beliefs, and then actions, then the top of this waterfall is your identity. And by the time you get down to the strategies, you have a very deep understanding and depth of self. Most people don't do that. They start with their strategy, so they start thinking about sets and reps. They talk about actions. I'm going to train 3 times a week, but they never really address their beliefs, their values, or their identities. And because of that, they always, or I say they nearly always, are in a position where they are failing, or they are jumping back on the horse, or they are starting again the following Monday, because the bottom line is, unless you make a shift from an identity standpoint, then you're always going to bring the same things back into your life. And that's what I'm going to cover today, right? Because what we don't realize is, and this comes deeply from the work of Bob Proctor, this isn't my work, but your self-image is a cybernetic instrument, okay? So what a cybernetic instrument is a cybernetic instrument is an instrument that stops something going off a deviate, or it stops something deviating off a set path. Okay, so if I pop on to the next slide, okay, we can use a autopilot in a plane as an example of a cybernetic instrument. Okay, so the autopilot is a cybernetic instrument. Plane takes off in Chicago, its destination is Paris. Okay, so it takes off, the pilot and the cockpit staff, they just hit autopilot, and they could come down and sit down and have their dinner beside you. Okay, because at that point, autopilot, being a cybernetic instrument, will lock its destination into Paris and it will find its route. Now, it can be hit by turbulence, it can be hit by bad winds, it can be knocked off route, but if that happens, the autopilot will just kick in and it will redirect it on its set path to Paris. And your self-image is a cybernetic instrument, okay? So if you think about this, right, when a person who is overweight goes on a diet without altering their self-image, any of that weight loss will be temporary. Because as I've said, the self-image is a cybernetic instrument, so it measures the deviation from the set goal and it immediately corrects the course. So you are just one emotional breakdown. Oh, sorry, that's probably too harsh a word. You're one bad day away from going back to what you believe about yourself. So you're on your weight loss journey, you're doing really well for the first couple of days, next thing, all of a sudden you have a bad day. Your bad day might look like this. You jump up in the weighing scales and you are the same weight as you were the week before. And all of a sudden, that cybernetic instrument, which is your self-image, kicks in and you start thinking, well, I was never really athletic in school and I'm 41 now, and, maybe my metabolism is slowing down, and, maybe it's just a hormonal thing. And then you start thinking in a way that resulted in you getting the outcome you always got, because your self-image has now redirected you back to what you believe is true. And this might be a hard thing for people to conceptualize or visualize, but your self-image is the most powerful driver of your subconscious mind. And the body is merely a very, very small player in this. And your conscious thought is a very small player in this. Your subconscious thought and your self-image, which drives much of your subconscious thought, that is the major player, and that is the cybernetic instrument within the context of this conversation. So what can we do to try to recalibrate, for the want of a better word, our self-image? And the first thing I feel we need to do is we need to practice the art of self-acceptance. And what I mean by that is that we need to get to the point where we can accept ourselves for who we are, with our perceived strengths and weaknesses, limitations and assets. The word perfect is the only word, sorry, not the only word, is one of the words that if tomorrow morning I had a choice to remove from the English dictionary, it would be removed. Perfection isn't there. It's just this perceived thought process, right? Or this perceived image, or this optical illusion of what we are being sold by media, by social media, by advertisers. There's no such thing as perfection. No one is perfect. Perfection doesn't exist in any shape or form of humanity. So we all have our own limitations. We all have our own areas within ourselves that we need to accept, okay? We may not necessarily be in a position to change them, but we need to accept them. So we improve what you can and you accept what you can't, all right? So self-acceptance leads to self-improvement. Okay, so I'll give you an example, and I could have given this example before. I'm not a great singer. I'm an average reader. I would regard myself as a good strength coach. I don't change what I feel about myself if I sing in public. Now, I will not be that confident to sing in public because I've accepted that I'm not a great singer. I try to read a book. I try to read 10 to 15 pages a day. If there's days where I don't read 10 pages because I have to go back and reread things to just assimilate it in my mind and understand it, I don't feel bad about myself. I'm a good strength coach. And when there's days where I'm told I'm a good strength coach, it doesn't really make me feel any better about myself because I'm really aware of that the fact that I am who I am, and what I'm good at is what I'm good at, and what I'm not as good at is what I'm not as good at, but it doesn't change what I feel about myself. And it doesn't change how I act either. So if someone asks me to sing, I'll sing. It won't be good, but I'll sing. Because why not? Why take ourselves so seriously? It doesn't mean that that I can't try to improve it. I probably could, but I have no real desire to, right? But I've accepted the fact that I'm not that great. And I think that in the world where we fail to accept our limitations because we feel that everyone else around us are so good, like what are we sold this perfect image of music? The person has to be perceived to be beautiful looking. They have to be really good singers, really good dancers, and it's a package. They can call it the X Factor, they can call it whatever. And that's what's wrapped and sold to us, that these people are, the full package. If you're perceived as not being good looking and you can sing, in many people's eyes, it's not what sells. And to me, that's shameful. That's, again, an indictment of where we are. Don't feel that how you look should have any impact on how you sell records and how your music is received, but unfortunately it does. And it's something that we have come to accept, and it's something that we all have bought into in our lives, okay? And the thing about this is where stress comes into it, and we must realize that stress is all about perception. And what I mean by that is we have three parts of the human brain. Okay, so we have like the brainstem, then we have the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is the first brain. So this part of our brain is the part of our brain that is responsible for the fight or flight response, for shelter and food. It's the most primitive part of our brain. Okay. Then we have the second part of our brain, and this is the part of our brain that's responsible for emotion. Okay. And then we have like that frontal cortex, which is our new brain, and that new brain is what separates us from the other primates and from the other mammals. And that's the brain that allows us to store an awful lot more and to develop an awful lot more and invent and be creative and so forth. But that midbrain is the first, now this is proved in science, that midbrain is the first part of our brain that detects a change, okay? So how we detect something has a massive effect on the chemical output from that part of our brain. So whether it's going to throw a stress response or whether it's going to, well, it's always going to throw a stress response, but how deep that stress response is going to be, okay? So for example, two people could do a bungee jump. One person might not be afraid of heights and might be looking forward to the jump. The other person might be scared of their life of heights and might be dreading the jump. Now, the same physical output is being imposed on both, but the response to that output is completely different. And that's the same in everyday life. You ask, I don't know, like you put 30 people into a room and you ask them, every person to individually stand up and talk. You might have 10% of people who are comfortable in doing that. and then you might have the rest who are not. And the stress response is going to be quite different to that event for that other 90%. And my point is that if we can control these constant stress responses every day to all these actions in our lives by just accepting that, okay, I'm not great at this, but it doesn't mean I can't improve, but this is where I am. As opposed to the first thing we do in that context of public speaking in front of 30 people is we start thinking, oh my God, I'm going to mix up my words. I'm going to make a show of myself. This person can speak very well and I can't speak that well. And then, we start comparing ourselves to other people. We start thinking about what other people are going to think about how we speak. And there we're going back into our whole self-image and our self-perception and that stress response that drives as well. Okay. Now you might notice that I have used the word practice, and I will through a lot. And I use the word practice because this isn't going to be something that comes overnight, right? You can't build self-belief on a weekend course or read it from a book. As much as people would like you to think you can, you can't. A practice implies that it's a discipline of acting in a certain way consistently over and over again, okay? Then we have the practice of self-responsibility, okay? And I think that, we're responsible when we're able to respond to life's challenges as healthy, autonomous human beings, not as victims, right? And I think that all we have to do is look at the political landscape at the moment and just have a look at America. And every so often I will throw on CNN and I'll hear people being interviewed, and it's all blame. They blame the government, they blame Trump, they blame corporations, they blame the cops, they blame race. It's all blame. But as individuals, we have our own ability to manifest our own desires as we engage in life. So instead of having this process of being the victim, don't allow yourself to be the victim. Even in a situation where you are blatantly a victim, don't become a victim, because a victim mentality is a mentality that straight away is going to taint your self-image, because you see yourself as a victim. You see yourself now as someone who has been persecuted, and you see yourself as someone who now starts blaming other people. And when you start doing that, you start thinking that, you start acting that. And then this practice of self-responsibility starts to become compromised, and now you are no longer in control, because you, in your own eyes, are now the victim of other people's actions. And what you're doing is you're losing control of your own life. The practice of self-assertiveness, okay? And again, this ties deeply into the conscious awareness lecture we had, which is the first lecture in this series. And you have to know who you are as a person, I believe anyway, before you can practice self-assertiveness. All right. If we could teach every child the practice of self-assertiveness, so that when they are in situations where their peers are offering them they're putting them in a situation that they are grappling with in their own head, whether to accept it or to not, then they can practice self-assertiveness and they can speak from their innermost convictions, values, feelings, and say, no, thank you. And have the confidence, the awareness, and the self-image strong enough to say no. No, but so many don't, because again, it's back to this lack of self-image. It's back to this peer pressure, you can call it whatever you want. But the practice of self-assertiveness is, number one, to know who you are as a person, know your life script, and then to live authentically and to speak and act from a place that is in line with your values, your beliefs, and your feelings. and let that guide every decision and every action in your life. And that is self-assertiveness. And again, I'll state it again, it's a practice, okay? And then the practice of, again, is personal integrity. And again, deeply tied into what I just said a minute ago, okay? So what is integrity? Integrity is the difference between what you say you're going to do and what you do. So that's what integrity is, all right? So if you say that you are going to live your life in such a way, then you do that. You do as you say, then you're living your life with integrity. So when our behavior is in line with our values and our ideals, and when they all practice up every single day and we're living our values, they're not just values that we write on a piece of paper like we did on level 1 of this, but we start living them, then that's integrity. And personal integrity is possibly one of the most important assets anyone can have in a society, in a culture, and in a time where trust is at an all-time low, where being authentic is at an all-time low, and where integrity is at an all-time low from the top down. Then the practice of personal integrity will set you from the crowd, unfortunately. And not only will it set you from the crowd, it'll ensure that you have the most fundamentally important thing that you can ever have in life, which is your word. And when people look at you, they will know that you are speaking from a place of trust, speaking from a place of respect, speaking from a place of honesty, and speaking from a place of personal integrity. And could you imagine if we lived in a society where that was the dominant paradigm and the norm? Then we would be living in a far different society. And again, this is Ralph Waldo Emerson's famous quote of what use to make heroic vows of amendment if the same lawbreakers is to keep them. And what we mean by that is, what he meant by that is, there is no point consistently saying to yourself, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, if it is your self-image that's going to pull you back all the time. The first thing we need to do is we need to alter our self-image, the perception we have of ourselves. And I firmly believe that the practices that I've outlined in the presentation will help us to do that. So our task is to consciously practice. Consciously practice not being a victim. Consciously practice integrity. I think that once we know who we are, and we should know this from task 1, now we have to practice it. Now we have to bring this to life. And when we start bringing this to life, we start changing our self-image, because now we know that I am deep inside me the person who I say I am. I've accepted my limitations. I know I'm not going to be the best of X, Y, and Z. I'm not comparing myself to anyone else. I'm perfectly happy, and I've perfectly accepted who I am, how I look, how I feel, what my strengths are, and what I need to work on. I have a deep understanding of self, and I'm now in a position where I will practice this consistently every day. And if you do that for a given time period, then your self-image and your physical self will align, and you will become a physical manifestation of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope that it shines a light on what you believe self-image is, right? Self-image is a cybernetic instrument. Again, like the thermostat in your house. The thermostat in your house is a cybernetic instrument. If the house is set to 20 degrees and someone opens the window, then the thermostat kicks in, brings the temperature back up to 20 degrees, close the window, thermostat goes down, switches off again. Your self-image is that. If you're locked into a consciousness of negativity, self-loathing, and sickness, then all the training, all the programming, all the eating, all the meditation is not going to help you. You have to first change the perception you have of yourself. And I can guarantee that the perception you have of yourself is not the perception that other people have of you. This is all what you are internalizing in your own head about you. And what we need to do is we need to start to practice consciously what I've outlined today. And again, it's practice because it's going to take time. And through the virtue of time, we'll start to manifest what we feel.